Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to try to unpack the story of Scott Bessent, Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary.
Bessent, huh?
Yeah, you might be thinking, who?
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we're diving in.
Okay.
We've got reports from Forbes, Fortune, and even some analysis from the Yale Chief Executive Leadership Institute.
Interesting mix.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the surface, Bessent seems like a bit of an enigma.
How so?
He's a Wall Street veteran with deep ties to both George Soros
Okay.
and Donald Trump.
Oh, wow. Two figures with very different perspectives.
Yeah, drastically different political and economic philosophies, which makes his nomination all the more fascinating.
So the big question is, who is this guy?
Right. How does he operate?
And what could this appointment mean for, like, everyday life? Finances, jobs, the stuff that matters to people.
Exactly. It's like what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington.
Right.
It affects all of us.
It trickles down.
Right. So let's try to unpack this a bit. Our sources paint a picture of Bessent as, well, kind of like a financial prodigy.
Okay.
Starts his career interning with the legendary investor Jim Rogers.
Wow, starting at the top.
Then works with short seller Jim Chanos.
Jim Chanos, the guy who predicted, like, Enron going down.
Yeah, the guy who famously predicted the downfall of companies like Enron.
So risky bets, but big rewards if you get it right.
Exactly. And it seems like Bessent has a knack for getting it right.
Okay, so what kind of bets are we talking about?
Well, a lot of our sources highlight his time at Soros Fund Management.
Soros. Okay.
This is where he really made his mark.
Like what? What did he do there?
So there's this one example back in 1992 where they shorted the British pound.
Shorted the pound. Meaning?
They bet against the British currency.
Old move.
And they were right. They earned Soros and his team, including Bessent, over $1 billion.
$1 billion. Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount. But what's even more interesting is that it wasn't just luck. They analyzed economic trends, political decisions.
A real in-depth research.
Yeah, they understood that the British government was trying to maintain this unrealistic peg to the German mark.
So they saw an opportunity that others missed.
Exactly. It shows that Bessent's not just about gambling, he's a strategist.
Right, he's a big picture thinker. He connects the dots.
Yeah, so we've got this image of him as like a brilliant, maybe even ruthless financial strategist, someone who's not afraid to take a big risk, but who does his homework.
Yeah, but here's what I don't get. How does this guy who made millions working with, liberal financier George Soros end up backing Donald Trump? The guy's known for his populist, protectionist, kind of against the grain economic policies.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
How did those two things reconcile? How does Bessent square those two worlds?
And that's what we really need to dig into. How does his investment philosophy, or maybe how it clashes with Trump's agenda?
Because while Bessent made his name in global finance, it seems his vision for the U.S. economy is, well, it's a bit different.
Okay, so lay it on me. What is Bessent's vision?
And how does any of this connect to, the average American? What are people going to see in their wallets, in their jobs, in their communities?
Yeah, what are the real-world effects of all this high finance maneuvering? Well, it seems like Bessent is a believer in what he calls a golden age for the U.S. economy.
A golden age, huh? That sounds pretty optimistic.
Yeah, and he's a vocal supporter of Trump's policies, especially tariffs.
Tariffs, those are like taxes on imported goods, right?
Exactly. The idea is to protect American industries and jobs.
By making foreign goods more expensive.
Right, making them less competitive.
Okay, so tariffs. But I feel like we've heard a lot about those, and there's always this debate about whether they actually work.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Some people say they protect jobs, others say they just lead to higher prices for everyone.
It's a complex issue for sure.
So where does Bessent stand on all this? And what does it mean for, the average person who's just trying to get by?
Well, that's a key question, and it's something we'll definitely want to explore further as we look into Bessent's track record.
Yeah, we've got to look beyond the rhetoric and see what actually happens.
But before we get too deep into the economic policy weeds, maybe we should take a step back
Okay.
and consider another side of Bessent, the personal side.
Oh, right, because there's always more to the story than just the numbers and the policies.
Absolutely. Our sources mention that Bessent grew up in South Carolina, worked his way through Yale, and will be the first openly gay Treasury Secretary if confirmed.
Yeah, and there's that anecdote about him pulling this, elaborate prank on a friend he was subletting an apartment from.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. Pretty funny.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder, will his personal background, his experiences, shape his approach to economic policy?
Right. Will we see any of that reflected in his decisions?
It's definitely something to think about. But for most people, I think the more immediate question is, what does this guy's appointment mean for my job, my savings? Can I still put food on the table?
Right, the bread and butter issues. To answer that, we really need to look at Bessent's track record, his successes, his failures, and what they might tell us about how he'll handle the U.S. economy.
So we talked about the British pound short, but are there other examples we can look at?
Yeah, there's another one that stands out. Fortune magazine highlights this billion-dollar win Bessent had shorting the Japanese yen back in 2013.
Another billion. This guy's on a roll.
But here's what's interesting. This wasn't just based on market analysis. Bessent and Soros actually met with the Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, shortly before making the bet.
So they got, inside information. Is that even legal?
Well, not necessarily inside information, but they definitely got a deeper understanding of Abe's economic policies and intentions.
So it's more about, reading the political landscape.
Exactly. It shows that Bessent's not just a numbers guy. He understands the power of relationships, of, getting a read on people.
Seeing the human element in all this.
Yeah, and that ability to connect the dots could be really valuable in Washington.
But those were wins for hedge funds, for wealthy investors. How does that translate to helping the average person struggling with rising costs or worried about their job?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And that's where Bessent's vision of this golden age comes into play.
Okay, let's break that down.
He believes that by implementing policies that promote American manufacturing, energy dominance, technological innovation, we can create this booming economy that lifts all boats.
The rising tide lifts all ships.
Exactly. Now, the idea of a golden age might sound a bit far-fetched, especially with all the uncertainty in the world right now.
Yeah, it's hard to be optimistic these days.
But Bessent seems to genuinely believe we're on the cusp of this new era of prosperity.
Where jobs are plentiful, wages are going up, the American dream is back on the table.
That's the vision, at least.
Okay, but how do those tariffs we talked about fit into this? How do they get us to this golden age?
Bessent sees tariffs as a key tool. He argues that by protecting American industries from foreign competition, we can create jobs, boost manufacturing.
And ultimately make America stronger, economically speaking.
Right.
But don't tariffs also make things more expensive for consumers? Doesn't that kind of hurt the average person trying to make ends meet?
It's a valid concern, and a lot of economists agree that tariffs can lead to higher prices for consumers.
Which then hurts demand, slows the economy.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
So tariffs might help some industries, but could also hurt consumers.
Potentially, yeah. There's no guarantee that this vision will play out exactly as Bessent hopes.
The economy is a complex thing.
There are a lot of factors, a lot of moving parts.
So we've got this picture of Bessent as a brilliant strategist, a risk taker, someone who understands both the numbers and, the human element.
But there's also this tension between his grand vision and the potential downsides.
Right, tariffs could end up hurting the very people he's trying to help.
And we can't forget that he's not operating in a vacuum.
There's a lot of political baggage.
He's coming into this role at a time of intense polarization, deep divisions over economic policy.
And then there's the whole George Soros connection.
Right, a figure who's become, let's face it, a bit of a boogeyman for the right.
Some of Trump's most diehard supporters see Soros as, this evil mastermind.
So how does Bessent reconcile that past relationship with his current allegiance to Trump?
And how will that be perceived by both sides?
It's a question that's going to follow him throughout his tenure.
So it's not just the economics, it's the politics, too.
Absolutely. It's all intertwined.
Sounds like Bessent's walking a tightrope here.
He is, and the stakes are high, not just for him, but for the whole country. Because the decisions he makes will have a direct impact on people's lives, their livelihoods.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. His background, his style, his vision, and some potential risks and rewards.
But before we wrap up, there's one more piece of the puzzle. It's all about impact.
Impact.
Yeah, how does this actually affect the listener?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
We've talked about his past, his strategies, his vision, but what does it all mean for, the person listening to this?
Because the Treasury Secretary, they might seem like this distant figure.
Right, up there in Washington.
But their decisions have this ripple effect. They go out into every corner of the economy.
And ultimately, they land in your life.
Exactly.
So it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's real-world consequences.
Absolutely. Think about it. The interest rates you get on a mortgage, the price you pay for groceries, the value of your retirement savings, even job opportunities. all of that is influenced by policies set by the Treasury.
Wow, okay. So when we talk about Bessent's golden age, we're not just talking about some abstract economic indicator going up. We're talking about like tangible changes people might feel in their daily lives.
Yeah, exactly. Bessent believes his policies can lead to more jobs, higher wages, a stronger dollar. That's the promise. But we also have to consider the potential downsides.
Right, like we talked about tariffs potentially leading to higher prices for consumers.
And his focus on American manufacturing, what does that mean? Does that mean a shift away from service-based industries?
And what happens to the people working in those sectors?
Those are all valid questions, and it's important to remember that economic change, even when it's positive, it creates winners and losers.
Some people benefit, some people get left behind.
Yeah. Bessent's success will depend on how he navigates all of that and makes sure the benefits of economic growth are shared.
Okay, so at this point, with everything we've discussed, what's the verdict? Is Bessent the right person for the job?
Honestly, it's too early to say for sure. We've examined his track record, his philosophy, his potential impact. Ultimately, time will tell how he performs in this new role. What we've tried to do here is give you the information to follow the story as it unfolds.
Right. So we've explored the benefits, the risks, the big unanswered questions. Now it's up to you to stay informed.
Engage with the news critically.
Form your own conclusion.
Exactly. And as you do that, we'll leave you with this thought. If you had the chance to sit down with Scott Bessent, what would you ask him? What questions would you have about his plans for the economy, his approach to the challenges?
How his policies might impact your life, your family, your community.
Those are the questions that matter.
Keep asking those questions.
It's your economy.
It's your future. Stay curious, stay engaged, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.